This is Unit 5. This is our lesson on rectangles. So the definition of a rectangle, please make sure you create a vocabulary card for this particular term, is a parallelogram with 4 right angles. Okay, so notice in the definition it says parallelogram. Right? It is a parallelogram, which means that the rectangle has all the properties that a parallelogram has. And what are those properties? 2 pairs, opposite sides congruent, 2 pairs, opposite sides parallel, opposite angles congruent. In this case, all 4 angles are congruent. Diagonals bisect each other. So these parallelogram properties do not distinguish the rectangle, right? What makes a rectangle beyond a parallelogram, or what makes a parallelogram a rectangle, is that it has 4 right angles. Okay. So all angles are right, which means the measure of angle A equals the measure of angle B equals the measure of angle C equals the measure of angle D, which equal 90 degrees. Definition of a right angle is that it measures 90. The side properties, there's nothing new. All those properties come from the parallelogram, right? So we know that AB is equal to CD and AD is congruent to BC, and we know that AB is parallel to CD and AD is parallel to BC. Again, those properties come from the parallelogram. Those are not new additional properties that make it a rectangle. So C, parallelogram properties. So the only new properties we really have here are the angle properties, that all the angles are right angles. And the other new property that we have is the diagonal property. And what we know about the diagonals of a rectangle are that they are congruent. The diagonals are congruent. So in a parallelogram, the diagonals are not congruent necessarily. And in order for that parallelogram to become a rectangle, the diagonals will be the same. So AC is congruent to BD. AC congruent to BD. Which means that all the bisected pieces will be the same, right? If AC is the same as BD, and a property of a parallelogram is that the diagonals bisect, then we know that AM is congruent to MC, is congruent to BM, is congruent to MD, because AC is the same as BD. So if AC equaled 20, BD would equal 20, AM would equal MC, would equal BM, would equal MD, which would all be 10. Right? So definition of a rectangle is a parallelogram with 4 right angles. So if we see a parallelogram that has 4 right angles, we know it's a rectangle. If we see a parallelogram that has congruent diagonals, we know it's a rectangle. All the other properties, which are listed next to parallelogram, are true for all parallelograms, and we'll discuss the other 2 types in our next 2 lessons.